Okay, the recording is now started, so we can go ahead and get started on our agenda. I noticed that right after, or shortly after I sent out the agenda, I got a response from Anne asking to review anonymizing reading history. So we'll do that when we get down to the third point in the agenda. Okay, I don't have any new news from LeBlanc. I know that the software continues to be worked on in terms of the holdings display, and there are a few things that are changing about that, and I'll try and show you what those things are. But keep in mind that what I'm showing you will be in version 6.0 rather than in 5.20. Again, the release notes for version 6.0 are at the link that's in the agenda. And the one area in particular that I wanted to share with you is the section here about the items holding table. It's been reworked and it's got a couple of additional controls that you can use. There is an option that you can turn on that will tell your patrons and faculty members and staff whether they're looking at a simple display or the group by holdings record. And that right now is turned off in the Waldo sandbox. I've seen it and I don't quite like it, so I keep it turned off. There's a second one where you can determine where you're going to show the holdings table. And this one is a little confusing to understand. So basically, when it's talking about the holdings information, it talks about what we see here. Right now, I've got it set so that it will display below the main 3-column display. And when you view the items, they will look like you normally see them because everything is underneath. If I were to change the option in the discovery layer, it would be limited. The space would be limited to from this margin to this margin about here. So our 3 columns is the area where the book jacket will appear, or I'm not sure what it shows right now. And sometimes it shows the call number and the title. Sometimes I've seen it show just a plain book image. This is the second column that this is referring to. And then this area for other navigation and other actions that you can do is the third one. So when you see it, and I believe this is how it will be turned on, you will see the holdings display within these margins. But because I have it set so that, as it says here, I can now see the entire display. Okay, there's another section of this that I've shown you before, but I want to show you again. In our, I guess I better log on. And in the item fields part of the administration, and if you've not looked at this in version 5.20 or 5.18, that's okay. I'm just going to show it quickly now so that you can see that it's there. there is a new option that is available here, which is this secondary column. If you want to show additional item information, for example, the locations or some other pieces of the item field, you can set it up so that it will be in what they're terming a secondary position. Okay. Let me get out of here. Sorry, I'll get here to a record. There we go. Okay, so this is what a normal display looks like. Everything that you have here is identified. You'll notice that in this particular instance, that in the holdings display, there is an additional field that is configured to show here. This date last seen, that's not necessarily something that is something that is in your display in 5.18, but it is something that you can now configure. You actually can determine now which fields are going to show in your items display. So if you don't want to show, for example, the Koha item type and the barcode, you can set those fields in this fields display to not display. Our visibility will give us the opportunity to identify in the results whether or not you want it to display just in the public area, the staff, or in edit mode. I think that the results means either, and public would be your public view, staff would be your staff view, etc. And edit would be, it will show when you edit the record, but it may not necessarily show in either of the other views. You'll notice that a lot of these are set for public. I didn't do these. These were just put in there as defaults when the software was upgraded to this current release. So you'll see that the classification source is set to edit. That means I'll only see it when I am editing an item record. The staff node, it will show when I display a record. And there are a few more down here that are set to edit. With this, in the secondary column, right now there's nothing configured for in the secondary column. But if we wanted to show the whole home branch all the time, we would select yes. If we wanted to show it just in the public view, we would select the pub. And if we didn't want to show it at all, we would select the no. So pretty much everything is defaulted right now to display. And if I changed any of these, I could effectively determine what goes into the item display itself when you're looking at a detailed record. The other thing that I want to point out on this is that you can determine how the fields are arranged. There is a default, which you've all been working with. It all looks pretty much the same to you from time to time, but I have in the past rearranged some of the item fields. for example, the barcode, I moved the barcode from somewhere down in this bottom area so it was closer up to the top, so I would be sure to see that item field. And again, the way that you move a field from one position to another is just to grab hold of those three dots and put it where you want it to go. And once it's in there, when I edit an item, it will be in the position right before the Koha item type. And when I display it in the OPAC, if I were to reload this page, okay, there's it didn't move right now, but keep in mind that this is version, oh no, this is version 6 point whatever they're at right now. I'll look into that. I know that there's another step that I have to do. I have to clear my cache and then reload the page, and then it would show up. But I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. Let's go back to this page. The information that is in the release notes gives you a real succinct view of what this changes, but the Super Librarian Guide has been updated, so it shows up in a couple of different places in that guide. So I would remind you to go into that manual. One thing I want to mention about going into the manuals, as you know, you can click on the user manual in the More drop-down. Come over here, and that will take you to the user manual. You can get to the discovery layer from the administration link to the global system preferences. And you can also open up the Super Librarian one through, I can't remember for sure which one that is, but when you open up the manuals, and I do have, for example, the Super Librarian one here, be sure and check the version number that you're looking at. It does make a difference. The version 5.18 manual, for example, will not have the information on the changes that have been added in. So even though there are these pieces that are available in 5.18, I'm sorry, in 5.20, shouldn't have started that way. The pieces that are just applicable to 5.20 will be in this version of the documentation. It won't show up in the version 5.18 documentation. So be sure that you are in the right manual when you're looking for it. If you are not in the right manual, rather than trying to go back into the wiki and to the meetings page, you can simply just change your number. Well, 128 is not a valid number, but you can then just change your number here and it will take you directly to that manual. Any questions about that? The other thing I wanted to point out about what has been added since our last meeting to version 6.0 is the fact that there have been many enhancements made to the facets. And right now, when you click on the More link within any of the facets, you'll get the record counts in the pop-up window. In version 5.20, I believe that when you clicked on More, you got the list of the additional terms, but you didn't get the count with it. So that has been added back in. That was something we had a long time ago and somehow got lost. And in addition to the date slider, there are now checkboxes for each decade, and those are based on the records found in the search. You can also type in custom year ranges in either or both of the sliders year fields and click Refine to do a custom date range. And the year fields have been widened. So let's take a look at that. You'll notice that the whole facets column has been modified somewhat. So it looks a little bit different from the version that you're using in production as it looks in the sandbox here, but let me go down here. You'll see we have our decades that are now listed here, so we could click on any one of these to get the refinement by those specific years, or we can change our years in here so that what we get in our slider is a little bit different. Let's see, let's go from the Great Depression until 2018. And it will narrow down the searches. If we wanted to go a little bit farther than that, you'll notice that our beginning date was 1929. Let's not go into that century. Let's just go to 1965. So the point of this is that the slider works a whole lot better than it has in the past. And it doesn't appear to be limiting. I'm not sure why that is. I'll investigate that more after the call, and if there's a bug there, I'll report it. But I think that, I know, Ben, that was one thing that you had commented on before, that the slider wasn't working quite right. And it looks like it's working a little bit better now. Okay, so those are some new things that are in Bibliovation 6.0. And again, you can look through the release notes and through the documentation to start familiarizing yourself with those new features. In terms of 5.20, I've noticed that a few of you have started the process of upgrading your production system to 5.18. I would encourage the rest of you who haven't already begun that to think about dates that would work well for you. It's a good idea to get on the calendar for LibLime so that you can choose your date rather than having to let them choose a date for you. So that would be a good thing to do. In terms of 5.20, last time we did talk a little bit about the anonymization of patrons in version 5.20. Let me go back here and let me start with a patron. Okay. One of the options in our left-hand column here is history. And as we've looked at before, the history has changed somewhat. You'll notice when I first go into my history, I will get my check-ins and checkouts for the first 50. If you want more, you can click on the show all and you'll get everything all the way back in time. Actually, mine only goes back to 2014, so that's okay. But in our history, it's been split into the reading record, the hold history, and the patron edit history. You can control what displays in the history itself by setting the limit yourself as a patron. So if you wanted to set the limit by yourself, you can go to your account and you can go to my general preferences, and as a patron you can choose to retain hold history or not. Okay. So that's the piece of it that you can control from your patron account itself, and then you can control what fields you would see when you look at your hold history. The check-in, check-out part of it is controlled in version 5.20 and beyond by a system preference that is called, it's a name that doesn't make, that seems to be backwards. Let me go to administration. It's called minimum issue history interval. Okay. A lot of the system preferences, you can pretty much tell what they are by reading the words, but this one is a little different. You can control how much of the checkout history is going to be maintained by filling in a number for this particular field. In this field, if you have a number greater than 0, in other words, 1, 2, 3, whatever, this value is going to determine how soon the checkout history is going to be anonymized. Okay, I chose 7 to put in there just because that seemed like a good number. I think that the University of Hartford will probably have a 1 in here. If you put a 0, the 0 means that it will keep everything. So that's one thing that you need to keep in mind on this. Once the value has been set, there's also a cron job that you need to have turned on basically for your site. And that is located in the systems. It's easier if I find it in the okay, this is the one I need. In version 6.0, this is where this changes. So when you're looking at the manual, trying to familiarize yourself with these, remember that the patron anonymization is in version Bibliovation 6.0. That's where this has been added. Okay, let this checked up. The appendix includes the names of most of the cron jobs that are available, and for the most part, the cron jobs that you need to operate on a daily basis are already turned on for you. But because of this change for the anonymization of patrons, there is a new cron job that has been added, and it is put in the manual in the not used by most sites, the anonymized previous borrowers. And if you are, if you want to run the anonymized previous borrow script, you'll need to let LibLime know that you want that run. And you'll also need to make sure that that minimum issue history interval syspref is filled in with a number greater than 0. Okay, so you'll notice here it says it controls how long to keep the most recent borrower information. If it's a positive number, scrubbing will not happen until the script is run after the minimum interval has passed. So if you tell the system that you want it to anonymize after 7 days, for example, it will not run until 7 days have passed. So it will run on the 8th day. There are some other jobs here that are listed that I know that we haven't looked at before, but amount due notices. Some of these are for the public library, used for the debt collection and the phone messages and text that it can be transmitted. And there are a few other ones here. There may be new cron jobs added as functionality changes, and I'll try to keep up on what is changed so that you'll be able to see what's there. Okay, so let me just review quickly. For the anonymization of patrons in version 5.18, when you look at your tools page, you will see a anonymized patrons / delete patrons in your list. You'll notice that in Bibliovation 6.0, which is what I'm showing you now, has just delete patrons. So you need to keep in mind when you go to this version at some point in the future, you'll need to determine what goes into the minimum issues history interval. And then let LibLime know that they need to run that batch job for you. Clear?
Becky, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I'm curious. It's Anne. Sorry. I'm curious about what Ben was saying last time about the anonymization. Do you or do you not lose the circulation history information, assuming you anonymize it like right after the next day?
I don't know the answer to that for certain.
Okay.
So that's something that I'll ask about.
Okay, thanks.
I would think that the two would be linked somehow, but I've never looked at it that way. But
maybe he can answer. I thought he had said something about that last week, our last meeting.
Yeah, Ben, when you anonymize every day, do you have any checkout history that's available in the patron history?
Hi all. So no, when we anonymize circulation transactions, it means that every single completed circulation transaction is gone. So the little connector records between a patron that had a book and the book itself is gone. The only thing that we keep is a stat that a patron checked out one book, or that a book has been checked out one time.
So it gives you a count, but not any personal information. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, there is one problem that we've had with tracking statistics, and that's for some reason we can't retain statistics between patron category and item categories. So we can't tell how many faculty members have checked out a laptop. Hope that
Okay,
helps.
I think it does. Thank
Yep.
you, Ben. Okay, let me go back over here to the agenda. The next item, number 4, is the Code Fusion meeting update. This is just a reminder that it's scheduled for April 16th. And after that meeting, one of us who attends it will give you a brief review of it. I suspect that the meetings, like I said before, are probably going to become fewer and fewer as the year goes on. In fact, I think they'll eventually stop, and we'll be, and then we'll probably look at a way to keep everyone informed of what's being requested in terms of enhancements. But we're not at that point quite yet. Speaking of enhancements, I started this enhancement list a couple of meetings ago, and we had just a couple of things on there. But since then, there have been a few more things that have been added, and I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of them, and that if you had any comments or questions about them, now would be a good time to bring them up. The patron-created accounts, this is something that Anne had brought up last time, I believe, and I read through your comments a couple of times and tried to shorten it into a few words. So I wanted to first ask you if this sort of summarizes what you had written last time.
Yeah, I think so. As long as they understand like what we mean by patron creating their, because it's probably going to be something similar to like an account, setting up an account or a cart or something at a store. So if they need a reference point. But there will be some point at which they'll have to be like authenticated or something, like they have to come into the library and be, or, there's got to be some way to confirm who they are once they've set the account up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And okay, so that will trigger what this enhancement needs to be when we expand it into a spec of some sort. Okay, there were a few others that were in either emails to the Waldo support list or private emails. The next one is store circ stats before transactions are anonymized, which is what Ben just talked about. And I was trying to get into my summary here about the relationship between patron categories and item types. And I decided I'd just let store circ stats cover everything. I think that will take a little bit of thought on exactly what it is that needs to be kept. But hopefully, Ben, does that sort of summarize what you were saying just a little bit ago?
I think so. I believe that the only stat that wasn't being recorded was the connection between patron type and item type.
Okay, but that's a pretty important one. There's got to be a way for them to store that before they delete it in the anonymization.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. I mean, it's something that we've asked about for a while. It seems that connection was broken. I mean, from the very start, and so we'd asked about it every year or so, every time the enhancements came up. But for whatever reason, it was just something that never really switched back on. Well, probably from the fact that we were the only ones nominating our circulation history, so there was only one library who was interested.
Sure. I think that has evolved over time. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the next one, I haven't put in the institution that suggested this first. After our last meeting, Stephen from Columbia Basin asked about being able to restore a deleted record. Since we can delete it, can we undelete it? Which is something that in previous systems that I've worked with, we've always been able to do. So I added it to our enhancement list. And actually, I think that depending on, I haven't looked at the table, so I'm not certain, but I think what I recall is that the deleted bibs will have all of the ones that we manually delete will have all of the fields stored. If it is a record that has a D in the leader field, I think that record is purged immediately out of the system. So that's one thing that I'm going to be sure to ask LibLime about in relationship to this particular enhancement request, because I think we need to be aware of how the record gets deleted will affect whether or not it's recoverable. And Stephen, that is sort of what you were asking for, right?
Yeah, it seems like as with the patron deletion, there could be a tool that you'd run when you were satisfied that all of the deleted records could be purged.
Mm-hmm.
But if you'd we have a whole bunch of cards full of things that some of them are deleted, and then I look at them and it's like, why are we deleting that? We need to put that back on the shelf. And I can find the record, but I can't restore it. So the whole process just needs to be redone, and it's hard for me to figure out whether it's really worth anybody's time. So it would be nice if it were an easier process.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, and Becky, Janelle has a very specific question about that anonymization, patron anonymization, whether the syspref needs to be a 0 or it has to be a positive number.
It has to be a positive number. It can't be 0. Actually, if you leave it at 0, it will save everything. It will never anonymize, even if the cron job is run. So it has to be a positive number. And if you put in a -1, it's going to act like it's a 0.
Ah, okay. Great. She says thanks.
Okay. Okay, and the last one that I have on the list here is to add dates on the acquisitions items ordered reports, at least the ordered and the date received. In acquisitions, I still think there's a lot to be done with reporting. I know that the programmer has said that it's because of all the relationships, it's hard to make the whole piece available for writing SQL reports. But this is something, Ben, that you had sent to me. And it definitely, I think it's something that would definitely be needed, especially if you're at the point of trying to either cancel orders or move the order to a different vendor. Okay, so if there are other enhancement requests that you can think of, let me know. I'll add them to the list. And I will make Patrick and John aware of the fact that there are some things that people are finding that they would like to have included in the software. We still have a few that had been identified in 2017 as some of the features that we wanted to have done. And for the ones that relate to authorities, we're waiting for South Central in particular to move to the Bibliovation 6.0 so that we can work together with them on coming up with some enhancements for authorities. The other two that we have here, I think, are pretty simple things to do and are not very difficult to do. So we'll see how that goes. That's pretty much all that I have for today. The weekly meeting that I have with Patrick and John didn't occur this week because Patrick was at Computers and Libraries Conference. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks, which is April 11th. And I'll keep watching the release notes to see what new things have been added to the software so that you can know about them. So I'll get the recording uploaded to YouTube as soon as we are done with the meeting, and we will meet again in 2 weeks.
Hey, Becky, you may want to scroll through the chat if you haven't taken a look at it.
To me that maybe there's something here. Oh, there is a lot here. And the answer to your question is yes, in Bibliovation 6.0, and I believe that you can do it in 5.18 with CSS, but that's something that I'd have to double check on. What was this in relationship to?
Sorry, you're still talking about my question? I was looking at the, in the sandboxes, you can see the item information, the holdings information at the bottom of in the results list. And I wanted to be able to remove that.
Oh, that's just it's a discovery layer option that you check on or that you either check on or leave unchecked.
Oh, okay.
So it's a really simple thing to do.
Okay, that's fine. I'll find it then.
Okay, and Janelle said that you have it set at 0 and you still have history. But this is with version 5.18 or 20.
She might have signed off. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Okay, let me see. Yep, you're right. Jennifer, about the SQL access, that's still on the list. And you're right, the reports don't really work well. Okay, and the question from Sierra, is there a confirmed timeline? No, there is not yet. I'll try to explain this the way Patrick explained it, because I did ask him this question, and he told me that basically it could be considered production ready at any time, but they haven't done that. There are a couple of, there are some installations of Bibliovation 6.0 out there in the world. I'm not sure which libraries they are, but there are some that are out there. With 5.20, it's really close to being at Bibliovation 6.0, although some of the things that I've seen in the release notes are things that you would probably want. So I haven't been able to get him to identify a specific time. But he is aware that I have asked the question. So I'll keep asking him about that when we meet, so that I can push him a little bit. Along with the question about when version 6.0 is going to be released, I keep asking him about, I just had it. I keep asking him about what the future is, what future plans are for online or for ongoing features to be added. And I believe that he has told me ERM is something that they would like to have added into the software, but he has no timeline on that. And I kind of like to get a timeline. Okay, did I catch everything? Oh, they're still, 6.0 is supposed to be the redoing of CERC. They really haven't changed as much as they had said they were going to, but I think that the internal workings of the software are much better. Because I know that with the work on the holdings information, they're trying to make it all more customizable for us. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll meet again in 2 weeks. Thank you all.